Welcome back to the latest, greatest, absolutely most fantastic episode of the MMA Prospectus for absolutely no reason that I can think of. It just felt right. I think that every episode we are on a continuous upward curve, like upward, not even a curve. It can't be a curve, can it? But a continuous like upward progression. Uh, I guess it could be a curve if it was like the curve that goes like that,
Yeah.
like the
The
exponential
exponential
curve.
growth. Yeah.
Yeah, exponential growth. We're on exponential growth.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's the like we're we're just shooting up there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we have absolutely produced every week. We are producing something that is far better than whatever we've produced before, and I think there are plenty of people that would back us up on that. I think if I put that to a general vote, I'm not going to because why waste my time? But if I were to put that to a general vote, I think that that would be far and
I'm
away the
I'm sure the
consensus.
I'm sure the listeners, both of them would strongly agree.
Yeah, I think it's, what's the sound of one hand clapping? Like it's you know, so boasting aside, we have a slightly different show this week. Just not, not like I'm going to be, dancing or something god awful, but this week is kind of devoid of excuse me, kind of devoid of prospects and so we're going to recap, go briefly through this week, recap last week a little like normal, and then take a look at just kind of like what does it mean to be a prospect in the UFC's different divisions? Because it's obviously like there are differences between being a prospect at heavyweight and a prospect at lightweight and a prospect at middleweight and a prospect at flyweight and all that. And just it's something that I'd kind of like to talk a little bit about because I don't know. It's a new topic. It's something that is interesting to address, and especially like this week, I was on Press Row, Jordan Breen's show, and we talked about the bantamweight division. What kind of a funky, weird little mess of Bermuda Triangle it is for the UFC, and that got me thinking. Well, rather than just talking about one, like, well, let's talk about it in comparison. Let's talk about all the divisions in comparison of what does it mean to be a guy trying to ascend the ranks.
Yeah, not to jump ahead, but bantamweight's always kind of been that way too. Like it's always been this like weird division, kind of
Yeah,
like for a long time, like what middleweight was, where it's like, is there anyone that like cuts that weight that is like gonna try fighting out and happens to be good at it in the near future? Because that'd be great.
yeah, and I think it's honestly just like the only reason I can postulate is that and I did this on the show, was that it's because it's stuck between like the heart of the UFC and the athletic fringes, where like if you are your standard UFC rising talent that fits 90% of the height weight statistics that most people are going to fit, then you're fighting between 145 and 170. And if you are a fringe athletic, if you're like some athletic super talent, then you're probably going to be fighting out at like 205 or 125, where, being an athletic freak is like, that seems to be where they all go. Like that's where they all end up. You look at the top few fighters at 205, and they're all like, these insane athletes that are just these genetic freaks. And then you look at the top few guys at 125, and they're also in that category. And so, guys like they can't go up, and they end up in the or down, and they end up in these weird sort of limbo divisions almost. And I realize that's not the whole of it. There's more stuff going on there. It's more complicated than that. But that's just kind of a theory I threw out there. Anyway, that's all far afield. The bantamweight division, yeah, it has been weird for a long time. Middleweight's been weird for a long time too. But before we get into all that, let's take a look at this week because we don't have a lot to talk about there. And I want to kind of burn through it so we can spend all of our time talking about, getting distracted with other shit. Looking at the big young talent that has tons of promise and that I'm expecting big things out of this week. And I guess I should lump a third name in there. Basically, I kind of see Jessica I and then Barboza versus Felder, and that's kind of all.
Yeah, this I actually talked to someone in the Chicago area that was like writing up a quick preview of this piece because obviously it's taking place in Chicago and really they asked like, so what is this card like? Give me like a sense of this card. I'm like, well, basically you got a title fight and then you got a bunch of action fighters more or less.
Yep.
And it's gonna be a fun card. I'm going
Yeah.
to it. I'm gonna be in the house for it. It's gonna be a fun card. I mean, like, when you got guys like Darren Cruikshank and Eddie Wineland and Ben Saunders, you're gonna have some excitement in there. And then like Joe Lozon and Barboza on the main card, like people are gonna get submitted, people are gonna get kicked in the head. But there's not really like a ton of talent on this card that is like immediately looking like it's gonna be building towards something bigger.
Yeah. I mean, we hope to see Jessica I win, and it is honestly a hope. And actually, I don't like I, so I don't really hope to see her win. Like, I mean, she threatened to sue Brent Brookhouse for saying she failed a drug test that she failed. Like, it's hard to then put my support behind her as a fan, but
She's a little bit prickly.
she's a bit prickly. But that aside, I want to see new blood at the top of that division. Like, I want to see fighters grow and succeed there.
Yeah, it's that co-main event was one that people asked the guy asked me about. He's like, give me like this fight in like a nutshell. It's like basically, I's the cresting fighter. Is this the moment where she ceases to be like a prospect? Because I mean, she's hit the point in her career where she needs to step up. Like
Yeah.
she needs to get a big time win, and she's had some good performances. But I mean, like Leslie Smith is like a less refined version of Jessica I on the feet, at least. So the fact that I like absolutely tooled her on the feet, not super shocking. I mean, the Sarah Kaufman fight obviously was a good showing for I, but like beating Tate, who's pretty much been like a top 3 person in the division for years now, would be huge. The problem is that Jessica's I's ground game is just so absolutely lacking that if Tate gets her down, it's very likely she'll lose the round, if not the entire fight.
Yeah, that's the thing is that I said this in our staff predictions that like I feel like you can hear a lever being pulled when Tate switches from wrestling to boxing or boxing to wrestling. There's like an audible clunk,
Yeah.
and yet the fact that she has two things that she does well makes her better than like 95% of that division.
Yeah. And I mean, she's been around. I mean, she's been around and she's been in there with some. I mean, like we're talking about someone who, despite all the talk of her being like, when she was talking about wrestling beats judo, and everyone's like, well, you were a high school wrestler. I mean, in her last fight, she out-grappled Sarah McMahon. Like she essentially pinned Sarah McMahon. And she's been on the ground with some really good ground fighters. I mean, like Marlos Kunin is one of like the top like submission artists in that weight division for a long time. Rousey, I'm sorry, not Misha submitted her. She's been on the ground for extended periods with Rousey and gotten out of some of her arm bars. Like Tate's a really competent grappler and, as you pointed out, a really competent striker. And Jessica I is a nice, really high volume boxer who mixes in a couple kicks and has a nice clinch game. So, like, I'll be interested to see what happens, but I kind of feel like Tate walks away with the win here just based off of like stylistic matchup more than anything else. But Jessica I has overcome technical deficiencies just through sheer athleticism in the past, so maybe she does it again.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, it would be interesting to see if it maybe even we end up with a Cat Zingano-esque type thing where Zingano got outworked early by Tate, and then the fact that Tate tends to fade in late rounds or has faded in late rounds before, means that I comes roaring back with something. But that like split decision loss to Alexis Davis, in which like she just kind of got handled everywhere a lot of the fight by Davis, or at least like she didn't like notably outstrike Alexis Davis.
Yeah.
That has me worried.
Yeah, like the Leslie Smith fight, obviously, like I looked great because she was facing someone who's like purely a brawler on the feet,
Yeah.
and so I was hitting little angles and little pivots as Leslie was coming forward, and she was really accurate with her punches that night. and just looked like a world beater in there. But I mean, it's Leslie Smith, who is an absolutely fun fighter. Like Leslie Smith is one of those fighters that you show like people when you want them to start liking women's mixed martial
Yeah.
arts. But she's not a super technical striker, and I just kind of broke her down.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if I is continuing to grow her game, because is she still out of strong style fight team?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, that's a pretty well established team in it's in Ohio, but we'll see what happens with her if she continues to grow or if she kind of stagnates, because it seems like she might be stagnating a little bit.
Yeah, I hope she can get over that. The other one, like we say, Paul Felder, Edson Barboza. This fight has me torn a lot, and it's one of those things too. Like I bring up Edson Barboza because I was just kind of like, oh yeah, Paul Felder, Jessica Eye, those are the two prospects on the card, and I always forget that Barboza has really like, he's at the point now where everything should start to be clicking with his game and where he should be turning that corner to being an elite fighter. Just now, like we
Yeah.
are we are just seeing should be just starting to see that out of Edson Barboza. And um it'll be I am totally torn as to which of these guys, whether Felder can show himself off as like a really fast rising prospect or if he's just taking that too big a step up against somebody who is currently like a great fighter in their prime.
Well, it's interesting because obviously I think Barbosa really got hurt by the fact that he had so many impressive wins early on.
Hmm.
The UFC just kind of went kind of all in on him for a little bit, and then it became pretty clear that he was kind of over his head. But I mean, like uh, finishing a dude with leg kicks in his debut, and then the Terry Adams spinning wheel kick that still gets played on highlight reels to this day. I mean, is it we looking back on it, like none of us should be shocked that a veteran like Jamie Varner, who came in like it was a short notice fight for Varner, and he actually came in fairly healthy, like for once. Like that shouldn't shock anyone that Barbosa got handled. Kind of looking back on it, kind of the same thing for Donald Cerrone fight, like that he got like 2 years later. That was like, well, Donald Cerrone is like such an advanced fighter at that point. Of course, he's going to chew up
Well,
Edson Barbosa.
and Barboza was beating Cerrone, like
Yeah,
handily tooling him before he got cracked. So it's not even like, it's interesting because I mean the game to beat Barboza is laid out, but it's a game he's tightening up. Like he's getting better at everything he does well, which means that you have to be better and better to beat him. Like Michael Johnson played the game plan perfectly, and he won, but it was still a really back and forth close fight.
it was. And Michael Johnson, like, I feel like just a couple steps ahead of Barbosa in terms of his development. Like, Johnson is officially in
Yeah.
that, like, developed fighter. Now he's going to go be a ranked lightweight. And I
Yep.
feel like Barbosa could be getting there. Paul Felder, his game's really fun. I think he's tailor made to beat wrestlers.
Yeah.
Like, his game is very much constructed to beat guys who are looking like wrestle boxer types. Um, so I'm not sure how that plays against Barbosa, who's not going to look for anything resembling a takedown. I'm sure Felder can strike with him, like in the sense that
Mhm.
like Felder's not going to be lost because this guy is not trying to take him down. In fact, we might see Felder's striking game open up a little bit more than it has in the past. But I mean, it's just Felder's, especially his check knees, are just some of the best in the game. Like
Yeah.
that was something that jumped out at me in that Castillo fight because I think that's the first time I saw Felder fight.
Hmm.
I'm pretty sure I missed his Jason Sago fight.
Which was
Uh,
ugly, anyways.
yeah, and I missed that fight, and then just based on all reports, I never went back and watched it. Um, but like the way he uses knees to just like discourage guys from changing levels is just awesome, and his clinch game is really really vicious. He mixes in a lot of spinning stuff, so I'm expecting portions of this to look like a Taekwondo match. At least I'm hoping. I'm hoping we get to see like Barbosa or like Felder throw a spinning kick and the other guy throw like a spinning counter. That would kind of make my night. But I'm really looking forward to that just because we're getting two guys who are fighting guys like that are very much not the type that give them trouble.
Yeah, it is interesting. It's I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if Felder can solve someone who wants to sit at range against him and pick him off,
Yes.
because that's not something we've seen him against even.
No, that's that. Yeah, and for Barbosa, it's a guy who's not looking to take him down. He's going to stand in front of him. Well, not, but and then Felder exactly. What does he do with a striker? What does he do with a guy who has no intention of grappling, who wants to sit back and work a kicking game?
Yeah, because I mean, like, basically, can Felder do a better job than Bobby Green did? Because it's, like Felder, Bobby Green had the same thing with Barboza, where he had somebody who wants to sit outside and strike with him, and he didn't really know what to do with it at all.
Yeah.
So I'm interested. I keep going back and forth because part of me feels like even if the fight is evenly matched, I trust Felder's chin to hold up with his power better than I trust. If he comes in and like works against Barboza in the pocket, I trust him to be able to land the kind of power shots that can put Barboza away. But at the other end, if he's sitting at range and just trying to wait for chances to pick Barboza off, I really kind of more trust Barboza to just wheel kick him in the head.
Yeah, I think I trust Barbosa more at range. I think Felder would probably be best served in this fight to make it an inside clinch fight.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I expect to see him doing.
It'll be interesting. Other than that, there's not really a lot to talk about on this card. I mean, guys like Holbrook have yet to show themselves to be prospects to watch.
Holbrook and Steele they're both being brought in on short notice, if I'm recalling correctly. So, Holbrook, both of them have their work cut out for them because they have pretty decent fighters. Like Ramsey Nijam, has had his ups and downs. He's kind of an inconsistent fighter, but he's definitely a talented fighter.
Yeah.
I got to see him up close and personal this week at one of our gyms in the city. He came in to do like his last workout before the fight. And the guy has some serious skills, and he's a pretty good athlete. It's just a matter of like putting it together. I mean, like this is a guy that, he's gone out there, he's lost to James Vick, he's lost to Carlos Diego Ferreira, but he's also beaten Benel Dariush. I mean, like he knocked Benel Dariush out. So that's the kind of guy we're talking about, where it's like the talent's there, the consistency we're just kind of waiting on. So it'll be interesting to see what he does, and I think that's a little past what Holbrook can handle.
Yeah, it's a fight that I expect Nijam to win. And yeah, so like guys like at the same by the similar tone, guys like Cruikshank and Vellante, they've also like we've seen them lose enough that like then they're at a point where they once again they need to prove that they are going to, like, they're not prospects. They're not guys we're looking at and saying, oh well, this guy's going to be a top talent at some point. It's guys where like he would need to show something different than what he's shown lately to show us that he's a prospect. So let's move on. Let's go back to Bisping Latus, the Glasgow card. The Glasgow card, and or I could say it like Goldberg, the Glass Cow card.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of good prospect performances on that card, a bunch of them. Most particularly, Stevie Ray and Jimmy Rivera got some serious work done.
Yeah, no, they both looked fantastic. I thought just overall this card ended up being a fair amount of fun. I didn't end up watching the whole thing because I had stuff to do, and this was like a 7-hour card, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it was brutal. I very much remember I had to turn it off after the Steve Ray fight, and I went about my whole day and got home and realized that Michael Bisping and Talis Latis had yet to step in the cage. It was terrifying.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Stephen Ray looked outstanding. I thought Michael Labute looked pretty good in this fight. He had a really entertaining fight with Timu. I got into it a little, or not got into it, but I had a brief discussion with Luke Thomas on Twitter, who was kind of dumping on their grappling a little bit. But it was one of those things that it was not really jiu-jitsu inspired grappling. It was a bunch of very much wrestling inspired grappling that was really fun to watch and kind of like
Hmm.
back and forth, and both guys were creating space really well. And I'm still waiting on a crucifix armbar from the top. Like I'm still waiting for one of those, and we almost got one in that fight. So I thought that was a really excellent fight. Um, uh, Obviously, Joe Duffy's triangle was awesome, though I'm not
Yep.
he's not really a prospect in kind of the way that like Conor McGregor wasn't really totally a
Yeah.
prospect when he got to the UFC, but he's been doing awesome. So it was overall a really fun, excellent card.
Yeah, Duffy reminds me a lot of Tony Ferguson, and I could see him having the similar kind of run to the top.
Yeah,
It's a very similar skill set and way they implement that skill set, frankly.
I think that's an excellent comparison.
But yeah, like I just it'll be interesting to see with Rivera too for me if because he's another guy who's come in. He's not really a prospect at this point. He's been fighting consistently since 2008. And
Yeah,
he's been winning consistently since 2008, and he looks like now he's at the point in his career where all of his skills should be clicking, and that's what it looks like in the cage. Is it looks
yeah,
like he's walking out there as a complete fighter, as a guy who can really be a good technical boxer with power for 15 minutes. And that could make him an instant threat in that bantamweight
and
division.
oh, absolutely. I mean, for as much as you can control the entirety of a fight for a minute and 30 seconds, he controlled Marcus Brimage for the entirety of that fight,
Yeah.
and then uncorked like some funky chicken power.
Hmm.
I mean, like Brimage was doing the funky chicken after he got hit. That was a nasty punch. So it was a pretty outstanding. Like Rivera looked really better than I even expected him to. I expected it to
Yeah.
be like kind of a little bit of a back and forth for a few rounds, and then for him to take over. I didn't expect like a minute and 30 seconds of just utter beatdown.
Yeah, it was great. It was a fantastic performance. Really just announces him as somebody who can be an immediately established talent in that division if the UFC is willing to push him. And the other big performance we got was Leon Edwards over Pavel Pavlak. It wasn't like big because frankly Edwards just kind of decided that he wanted to just take rounds and out clinch Pavlak and didn't want to turn it into a brawl or outstrike him for most of it, even though he ended up cracking him hard with the head kick late. But it was also one of those fights where, like, even though Edwards didn't fight to his strengths, he kind of breezed by Pavlak.
Yeah, that was it was not super exciting, but I mean, like Edwards implemented what he does well and was easily able to collect a win, which is something you want to see fighters be able to do.
Yeah, you want to see guys when they're in a fight where they're not feeling things and where like something isn't clicking for them, still go out and just get an easy win. You want to see um, Mirsad Bektik's fight with Paul Redmond isn't a good example, where it's like, maybe Bektic isn't getting the ground and pound going the way that he wants to, and maybe he's not dominating the striking like he should, considering the opponent he has in front of him. But he's also just like really easily dominating this guy for 15 minutes without any real question about it.
Yeah.
So not the kind of performance that's going to get anyone really super hyped on Edwards, but still, like he's already like after his knockout over Seth Bashinsky, where we've seen what we can do, and dropping Pavlak like he did, which frankly should have knocked Pavlak out. It's a reminder that he's gonna win. He's gonna beat most guys in his division just by showing up and getting in the cage.
Yeah.
Um, that kind of covers most of what we had to talk about on that card too. Other than Alir Latifi, actually, he's not really a prospect. Still, like at the point too where things should be clicking. He's been around for since 2008,
Hey,
but thank
have you
God
seen
he
his
won that fight.
backflips?
What?
Have you seen his backflips? The man is like a
Yes.
quadruple plus athlete.
He is. He really is. And it's just one of those fights where, like, thank God he won that because that division so badly needs, even if Latifi never climbs higher than, like, the fringes of the top 10, that division so badly needs dudes that can just get in a fight. Like, somebody who can fight even like Jimmy Manawa or Ryan Bader. Like that, they need those people. Like that can just get in the cage. Can
And
somebody can who can fight OSP even, and it does has so few of them.
yeah, I mean, like he probably would do pretty well in like against those fighters in like a strongman competition. That's probably the best shot he has. But I mean, he could get in there and scrap it up and go down in flames in an entertaining fashion.
Yeah, I mean, you can't put Hans Stringer in those fights.
Well,
Like,
obviously not because he got run over.
yeah,
Oh man, Hans. Yeah, we're gonna get to the weight classes in a little bit, but good lord, it does not take much to be an intriguing light heavyweight currently.
yeah, it really doesn't. So I was really glad to see him doing, him get that win. But let's move to this topic we have because this is actually a pretty good bridge to that topic of like guys like John Vellante and Ilir Latifi are what light heavyweight prospects look like.
Yeah, yeah, that was a long weight class to scout, and I didn't even have to do most of it. But
Yeah.
that is light heavyweight prospects and heavyweight prospects. They tend to be a bit older. They tend to be a bit more rigid and stiff than your other like super prospects. They look a little bit more awkward, and they don't have nearly the complete game that you'd want them to. So pretty much you're looking for the guy who is the most natural athlete, and
Hmm.
then just assume that in 4 years he's going to have picked up some skills that's going to make him a big, that's going to make him better than most of his contemporaries because there's not that much out there to compete with.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons that like I'm still really high on Corey Anderson's future in that division, even after getting beat by John Vellante. It's because he's a really good athlete. He's tough, and you just kind of have to assume that given another 4 years, he will continue to progress, especially because he's young.
Yeah, and I think the other thing people like we talk about like aging curves and things like that, and I think I've actually spoken to Pat a little bit about this, but I think we need to like do a weight class by weight class look at it too, because you have a much longer career at light heavyweight and heavyweight if you're a good athlete and fairly good at fighting than you do in almost any other weight class, just because there isn't that level of guy coming up to like supplant you. And I think middleweight can I think middleweight's probably like a middle ground between those two, and then like the rest of the like more talent laden divisions in the lower weights. But you can hang around and develop your game for a long time in this division. I mean, we're still talking about like Frank Mir getting meaningful fights at heavyweight.
Yeah, heavyweight. As a bridge to this, like heavyweight in terms of prospect development is really like we're just talking bizarro division land right now. Looking at the guys on the rise, you have Jared Rosholt and Ruslan Magomedov, and they're sort of exactly in that same light heavyweight mold of like OSP, where it's like they're really good at some stuff, but it's not everything. It's not the kind of thing where people watching them are at home going like, "Oh man, this guy is just going to be a world destroyer." And heavyweight has had a few of those guys. It's interesting to see if Bilal Makov is going to be one too, where he's and light heavyweight gets some every now and then too. Like your super talents are going to be your super talents. That's not really what we're talking about because every division gets those like generational talents who just run through everyone, get to a title shot, and are like the super dominant champ or even just a very good champ. But if you're just talking about like how does above average fighter A become top five, you're really, you're talking about Jared Rosholt is like a shoe in future top five heavyweight as long as he keeps fighting.
Yeah, and I mean we're talking about like obviously with all the talk of like Fedor coming back, Khabib went out and gave a comment like, "Oh well, Fedor can come back as long as he understands that MMA has changed a whole lot since he stopped fighting, and the proper response to that is not at heavyweight.
Yeah, it
Because
really has.
at heavyweight, we're still talking about Werdum, we're still talking about Velasquez, we're still talking about Mark Hunt, we're still talking about Frank Mir, we're still talking about Gabriel Gonzaga and Andrei Arlovsky, and Roy Nelson. Like, all the guys who were players when Fedor retired are still players now, with the exception of Crow Cop, who ceased to be a player years ago. And there's
But he's back in there, and I think he's even ranked.
Yeah, the only newcomers
No,
on
he's
the
not
scene, the only real newcomers on the scene, since Affliction went under, is really what is Stipe Miocic, and that's pretty much it. Maybe
And
Ben
Travis Brown.
Rothwell's been around for a long time, huh?
And Travis Brown, but we're not going to talk about Travis Brown.
Oh well, yeah, Travis Brown, but we're not going to be seeing him for a while.
Yeah. Otherwise, no. I mean, everybody else, Alistair Overeem is still in the hunt. Ben Rothwell has put himself in the hunt, and he has been around forever.
Yeah.
Those are the guys you're talking about, and it's.
Stephen Drew is still a.
No, he's not.
He's ranked in the top 15.
I know, he is.
It's ridiculous.
But, yeah, so that's the first thing. Talking about what it means to be a prospect in these divisions. And what's interesting is that I actually almost think, in terms of heavyweight and light heavyweight, that at the moment, and this I think will change, but at the moment, you can kind of lump flyweight into that as well.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with flyweight, but I kind of agree that we're really not seeing a ton of new talent coming into there. I mean, they have some guys, they have Ray Borg and Henry Cejudo and Luis Smoka. Oh wow, I've already listed 3 guys that kind of puts him ahead of heavyweight.
Yeah, it does. But then that's not what I mean. I would say this. I think that flyweight will develop a lot more talent from the bottom going up, but I do think that it is at the moment we're seeing Kyoji Horiguchi and Chris Carriasso getting title shots. We're seeing them just push guys from the bottom to the top in a heartbeat. And that's sort of a heavyweight, light heavyweight thing where you're getting guys who, and we're talking about Henry Cejudo being a title challenger now at, what, 6-0, 7-0 for his career, Cejudo right now.
Yeah.
And anyone who is on a run at flyweight is going to get a shot at the title.
I feel like flyweight's kind of in the phase that featherweight and bantamweight was in, where it got made a UFC weight class, so suddenly it was a way more viable weight class, and we had a bunch of guys from bantamweight drop, and that really cleared out a lot of bantamweight talent. I mean, when we're talking about Joseph Benavidez and Demetrius Johnson, I mean, bantamweight used to be a really, really heavily stacked division, despite the fact that there wasn't this huge upswell of talent in it, and it was this weird kind of in-between division. Really, all that has been amplified since flyweight came out because so many good fighters went down to flyweight.
Yeah.
But I feel like we kind of saw it with featherweight, when featherweight kind of became this new division, and all of a sudden there was this big upheaval in the featherweight rankings, where all of a sudden people oh well, there were a bunch of really good dudes at lightweight who could make the cut to featherweight who just didn't because they wanted to fight in the UFC, and now they are really good featherweights for a while. And you had guys Mike Thomas Brown, the champion of the WEC, when right before Jose Aldo took over. I mean, he faded hard once the lightweights started dropping down. There were a couple guys in that division, so I kind of feel like we're in a bit of a tumultuous period with flyweight, and now that it's a really established division, that we're going to see a bit more talent coming up through it. I'm just thinking we're starting to see that with guys like Ray Borg and things like that.
Yeah, and no, it's not like I say, it's not so much about. I think with flyweight, the question isn't like the quality of the fighter that's going to get to the top, like it is with light heavyweight and heavyweight, where you're. And this is a key difference. I'll admit, because with light heavyweight and heavyweight, you're really looking at like incomplete fighters who are going to develop incomplete games and still become top five potential title challenger level talent.
Mm-hmm.
And at flyweight, I think the fighters, we're going to see more better talent that is complete on the way up. But we're at a stage where, like, unlike bantamweight or unlike featherweight, lightweight, welterweight, guys aren't getting the time. Like, there's no developmental period to flyweight.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That flyweight right now is we're very much rushing guys. I think that time's going to start. We're going to see that time
Yeah.
starting to stretch out.
Yeah, it might become a more normalized division. It'll be interesting to see because bantamweight. This is the weird thing is that on the flip side of that, and this is getting to bantamweight and middleweight, kind of lumping them together like we talked about with the show, is that those divisions are almost dead in terms of getting a guy from the bottom of the division to the top.
Yeah.
Like nobody starts out as a low-ranked bantamweight or as like with no UFC fights and gets to a title shot. It feels like.
Yeah, it's one of those divisions where just like I feel like a lot of they're kind of in a holding pattern. I mean, obviously they have some good fighters.
Yeah.
They got some great fighters. T.J. Dillashaw, Renan Barão, Dominic Cruz. Speaking of waiting patterns and holding patterns, there's some fantastic fighters, but we really haven't seen a new young face come onto that scene in a while.
Dillashaw and McDonald were the ones to do it most recently. They were like the really young guys to just shoot up the division, get that shot. After Barao did it to some extent, but he never actually faced the champ. Like he became the interim champ and then got the belt and then lost it.
Yeah.
So he never actually like was able to get that title shot against Dominic Cruz. Um, but McDonald and Dillashaw were the ones that rose up the ranks, and then McDonald immediately has like been out forever with injuries. Like he's another permanently sidelined, permanently injured fighter in a division in which Rafael Assunção has been out forever, Dominic Cruz has been out forever, Michael McDonald has been out forever, Johnny Eduardo has been out
Well,
forever.
even as we're talking about McDonald, like the idea that like, oh, he was one of the guys that like shot up through the ranks. I mean, Zuffa found him originally in the WEC. I mean, that's where his first fight was. So this is like we're talking like 2010 was when this guy, because it was who was the guy? He got an awesome armbar on Clint Godfrey, who was like a pretty experienced like regional dude, like not an easy out, and McDonald just threw up this phenomenal armbar, and I remember that getting a lot of people's attention. Like, oh, you got to watch this kid. And then he ran off some pretty good wins, and then yeah, like you said, just couldn't be. Got beat by Barao, got beat by Faber, and then it's just disappeared since then with injury.
And you look at the guys that the guys after him that were supposed to be rising up. Alex Caceres just fell off the face of the earth.
He was also like a product, like a rising guy that like they found on Tough.
Yeah, but he was still like I think it was reasonable to have some expectations that he would like be a ranked fighter at some point.
Yeah, like he was one of those guys that he could be like I think he kind of turned into what he was going to be, like an action fighter, like a middle of the card action fighter.
But he's he's actually fallen off from that since then. Like, it seems like he's regressing. But then so you had him, Yuri Alcantara. It seems like he kind of aged out of his peak before he ever reached it. Honestly,
I feel like Hani Yahya is kind of in that.
Hani Yahya, yeah, he's been just. But Mitch Gagnon has been affected. He can't get travel visas. And Eric Perez just kind of like we're not, we have not seen the development out of him. He ran into Mizugaki and has now just been like out forever. Russell Doan was supposed to be somebody that was going to be an interesting talent, and he's just hitting setbacks now.
As long as we're talking flyweight and bantamweight and kind of letdowns, John Lineker needs to be mentioned.
Yeah, Lineker is sort of the flyweight guy who is just totally failing to capitalize on potential. But a whole generation of what was supposed to be rising bantamweight talent
Yeah.
that just has not risen at all.
Yeah.
And now you. Oh,
Uh-oh.
sorry.
Sorry, I'm having some. I think either I'm having some connecting issues or you're lagging on me a little bit. Uh-oh.
Tom's connection dropped. So what I'm saying is that like we have this whole generation of potential rising bantamweight talent that just didn't. It just didn't come up and take part in like really substantially the top 10. And Rivera is probably the guy that has most, you know, and that's been so. Has had similar continuous problems producing talent and getting guys to push up the ranks. I mean, middleweight, you look at the top rankings of middleweight right now, and if you take out the strike force fighters, this is what the middleweight rankings look like. This being the way that um, the way that the, the way Jacare Musashi and uh,
Wow.
I have no idea what people are seeing.
Oh,
Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you. Sorry, I've been getting disconnected like every time I try to rejoin. Not sure what's going on. And it just froze again.
This is strange. Oh man, I have no idea what's getting through. So I'm just going to keep talking and hopefully Tom will be able to come back in. Maybe I will try and lower my video quality here to help out. Not that I want to do that, but there. Let's see. That's not great, but hopefully maybe that'll help stabilize everything. I have no idea.
Oh, there we go.
Did that just help stabilize everything?
That did. Oh, wow, that was weird. What happened?
I lowered the quality on the video, so apparently the bandwidth issue may be on my end, but I can't exactly fucking reload this thing because I'm the
Yeah.
one controlling the call. If I
Well,
reload it, I'll just drop it.
Zane, this goes with my general theory of just blame it on you. Yep, there it goes.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
fine. No. All right, I'm just going to stop the broadcast. We're going to assume we did a whole show. And